Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conversation With series. Today, we are excited to have Aoife Horan, award-winning PGTA at UCL. Aoife, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Great. First of all, let's start with a round of introductions. Could you tell us a bit about yourself, your teaching interests, and maybe a fun fact about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did my BA in economics in Trinity College Dublin, where I'm from. And then I worked for 2 years as a management consultant at Accenture Ireland. And I did a lot of work with developing training programs there. So that's where I started teaching a bit. And then I did my MSc in economics in UCL. So I graduated there in 2020. And during my time, my main research interests are in macroeconomic policy, mainly with a focus on income and wealth inequality. So I did that. And then when I graduated from the MSc, I joined UCL as a teaching assistant and course manager for the Introduction to Economics first year program. Fun fact about myself. So as I said, I'm from Ireland, but I'm actually living in Paris at the moment. And I moved here during the pandemic. So it's been very strange getting to know Paris with no tourists. It's very, very different from what everyone else sees.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. Thank you so much for this. So we know that you have received the 2021 Provost Education Award. First of all, congratulations for this achievement. Could you please tell us a bit more about it and a bit about some of the teaching techniques that you used that worked really well with your students?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a great honor to even be nominated for the award, let alone win. So I had a fantastic time in UCL's Department of Economics. So I won the award for both my work as a teaching assistant, teaching first year courses, and for my work as a course manager. So as you can imagine, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a huge change in how we were going to deliver the first year economics program. And this required a huge amount of change. We went from 250 students normally to 750. So my role was really about managing this transition and making sure that both students and staff were fully supported in this, and we maintained the quality of education and gave first year students the best experience possible. So technically managing this transition and also being, a point of contact, a support and a communicator for the students. So this was my course manager role. And then I taught 3 tutorial classes as well. So the kind of teaching program we used in UCL is called the core curriculum. So this is an undergraduate curriculum that really tries to embed economic theory in the real world and use economics to address real world problems and make sure the students coming out are looking at the world in a sustainable and democratic way. So I found this to be a really useful program for teaching first year students. So from my own experience, when you're first getting into economics, it can be very difficult and very abstract. There's a lot of equations and graphs, and it can be a bit difficult to wrap your head around it. So the great thing about core is that it really embeds it in the real world and uses these theories, look at real world problems, societal problems. And this is a great way to get students really interested in the course and interested in the material, and helps them to kind of really think laterally about where we'll use economics to kind of solve societal issues. So this is a great technique to kind of get people engaged even in a virtual environment.
Yeah, this sounds great. And in terms of your teaching techniques, what are some of these techniques that you would recommend to other teaching assistants looking kind of to improve their teaching? Or are there any resources that you could recommend to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so much you can do out there, and it really depends on the class you're going to be teaching. So as I said, I focused on first year students. And a really important thing for them is to take a very active learning approach as they're making the transition from secondary school to university. So coming from secondary school, students might be more used to kind of a teacher to student learning approach, whereas in university, you're more expected to kind of have a more collaborative approach and really engage with the material and discuss and think about it yourself. So this is really important for teaching assistants to really guide students through this process in the tutorial classes. And I found this to be more important than ever now that we've moved to online learning and a blended learning approach. This can be very difficult for students initially if they're not used to it. So as a teaching assistant, you really have to think carefully about the techniques you'll use and how you're approaching this to build confidence and make people comfortable in the classroom with how they're going to engage. So as you said, there's so many different resources that we like to use to kind of make this happen. So we might use different polls. This can be a great way to structure the class and give people, a little bit of information initially, and then ask them to build and discuss. Small breakout rooms, similarly, great way to get people to kind of talk in a small environment where they might be a bit more comfortable than in a bigger class. So really just using these variety of tools can be great. And then I guess the biggest tool we probably use, and a lot of the TAs at UCL use, is Mentimeter. So this is kind of a polling tool a lot of people are probably familiar with. You can do polls and word clouds, and we use this a lot. As I said, it's a great way to kind of structure the class and structure the discussion a bit, give people a good input that they can then build off. Makes it a bit easier to kind of facilitate discussion. So there's a few really good benefits of this. We used to like to start classes with a poll. It can be a great way to, one, identify any areas of issues. So if you have some polls on the content, see where people might be having trouble and where you might need to focus in on in a class. So kind of have that flexibility. Two, it can be a great way to generate some debate. So with poll questions, it can be a very good way, if there's no clear-cut answer, to get a bit of discussion going. So when we're learning game theory, this is a great one. You might have a certain real world scenario and discuss what type of games or structures we could use to examine this. And there's no one answer, so it can be a great way to have discussion. And then, similarly, it can be great for just taking the economic theories that you've learned and the content and applying it to real world scenarios. So things like word clouds can be really helpful for that. So there's a really variety of things you can use there. It's just great for kind of keeping the class a bit more interesting, and it's great for getting feedback from people in a bit more of a different way.
Yeah, definitely. As a student, I can confirm this is useful, highly useful.
Yeah, it's good to start off and get people engaged straight away, and then it sets good standards.
Now, coming back a bit to your experience with first-year economics students, so sometimes there can be a bit of a gap between the knowledge each student has. What are some of the techniques that you use to address this kind of issue?
So as I said, the polls are really a great one there to kind of see where people are having more areas an issue. It tends to be a lot of people will struggle in certain ways. Some people might be more into the mathematical side of things, whereas some people get more the kind of real world applications. So it really varies by class to class. Polls are a great way to do this. Small group discussions are great too, because as the TA, you can jump into the different breakout rooms and get a bit more one-on-one time with people then and really start to focus in. And office hours are another fantastic facility for both the TA and the student to get to build those relationships and understand where people are having those issues. Particularly in such a huge cohort of students, so there's 715 UCL, it can be very difficult to get that one-to-one time and really understand where people are having issues. So the tutorial setting and office hours, just encouraging people to make use of that as much as possible. Kind of is a meet halfway kind of thing as well, but they're fantastic facilities for students to really be able to kind of get that one-to-one time and focus in on the areas they're having issues.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now moving a bit forward to small group teaching versus large group teaching. These different environments can sometimes need different approaches. What are your approaches to this type of different settings?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many positives to having the kind of small group. As I said, when there's such a big group, students are like learning a lot from the books, and then you go to a lecture where they might be kind of focused more on the overall major issues or where the more difficult areas are. And then that small group environment is really the best opportunity they have to talk directly to the teaching assistant and to the other students. So talking to the other students is a really important part of that and can be a huge benefit, particularly this year when students aren't based necessarily on campus and they don't have that engagement in other places. So that was really the most important thing I wanted to facilitate this year. It's getting that chance to talk to others, whether it be, discussing issues they're having or applying the concepts to a different problem. And they can be great ways to just, one, to just get to know other people in your course, and then but learn off each other too, and, figure out how to debate and kind of structure your answers that way. It can be fantastic. So there's really huge benefits to that small group environment. And as I was kind of saying, you can do different things too. It can be very routine for students, you learn from the book and then you go to your class and do a quiz. Tutorials are a fantastic opportunity to do something different. So that's why I like trying to do as many different things as possible as I can in the classes. So breakout rooms, polls, word clouds, whatever we can do to kind of games, mix it up a bit. But there can definitely be challenges too in the small group environment, in a virtual environment, and to kind of get people engaged and get people talking from behind the camera can be a bit more difficult. So kind of one thing we do in UCL, which was really useful, is the first year challenge. So this is at the very beginning of the year for students, and they do these small multimedia projects, just a 2-minute project with a few others from their tutorial class. And it's just a great way for everyone to get to know each other really early on, kind of build that familiarity to give people a bit more comfort in the classroom. So whatever you can do to make people comfortable, they're going to be more engaged in the small group environment. And then, that's really where you're getting the benefit compared to the large group environments. So that's what we really want to get out of the small group classes, is that engagement and the students kind of leading the way.
Yeah, definitely. That definitely makes a difference. Now, looking a bit into the future, when teaching returns to normal, is there anything you would keep from the online teaching environment, such as pre-recorded material or virtual office hours, maybe?
Yeah, I think the pre-recorded material, we've really seen that students have really liked that in a way, because it gives people so much more flexibility about kind of how they learn and putting it at their own pace and in their own way. So, some people like to review the material first and then go to the lecture and kind of have that as a way to think about it and discuss it a bit more. Whereas some people like to learn from the lecture and then kind of use the material as a review point and look at more difficult things. So it really gives people that flexibility. I think we will keep a lot of that moving forward. Having all the materials online are a great way to allow for flexibility, and just it can suit people better then in that way if they can do things how they prefer. So I think that would be fantastic moving forward to have some of that more asynchronous material for people. But on the flip side of that, we also then need to make sure that we still have the supports in place for students. So this flexibility might be quite different for some people who aren't used to self-directed learning. So making sure we're still supporting people, identifying issues is really important then too.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. Well, thank you so much. These were all our questions for now. So thank you so much for your answers, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for talking to me. It was great.